Well, hello, this is Randall Rudd, and today we're going to be talking about attributes for success and what this amounts to. And you're going to be hearing this as a constant theme throughout the course. These are tips on what you should be thinking about and the way you should be the way you should be acting in order to succeed in this business. And a lot of these things are some of these things are very professional, some of these things are rather personal, but they're tips and guides and hints for you guys to think about as you move forward. I'll tell you this, when I was your age, I would have given anything to talk to someone in the business. I didn't know anyone in the business, but to find out what it is that it's all about, what it's really like to be on the other side, not looking from without, but from being within, what matters and what doesn't matter. And that's what this is about. That's why we call it attributes for success. So when I look at what are the attributes, we may as well list them, I think, in order of importance. And that being the case, this may be the most important. There's an argument between what's more important, talent, ambition, or passion. And sometimes it's a toss-up. There are less talented people that have more push or more drive that can get there. It's a little harder for them to stay in place, but many of them do just as well as those with a lot of talent but no ability to sell themselves, which becomes very important. And some of the good news here is that you're going to get some very important information on how to sell yourself. This is kind of a prep course on hopefully how to get placed in the business. And not only that, but also to find out what interests you most in the business, because I will tell you that you're going to do best at something you love. And a lot of that has to have passion for the job. Without absolute passion to be a part of the entertainment business or to create, you will likely find it hard, if not impossible, to sustain a living in the business. You'll most likely never excel if you are complacent or into filmmaking because I may as well, I couldn't find anything better, or it's what they call a glamour industry. Oh, it has lots of status to say, oh, I'm a filmmaker, or I'm an animator. If that's your motive, it's best to walk away, honestly. Don't waste your time or the time of others who are committed, because you will find yourself in a gladiator pit with lots of people who are deeply committed to what they're doing. So you can potentially make a living, but if you're going to thrive, you'd better have the passion and the love of your work, because that's what keeps you working those extra hours to get that piece of work, the art that you're working on, as good as it can possibly be. So secondly, ambition. And this is, I hate to say it, but it may be equally important to talent. In the entertainment business, this may not be absolutely essential, but it most certainly helps, and it helps a great deal. Ambition is aspiration. One may aspire to achieve excellence in their chosen field. It can also be aspiration to be famous, or to work in a glamorous profession, or to boost one's self-esteem. You really have to be careful about that. If you've got the right kind of aspiration, then it will serve you well in this business. Next, drive. Drive is the complementary to ambition. Drive is taking action. It's not just wishing, it's actually doing something about it. And many a college student wishes and wants to work at, let's say, Walt Disney or whomever, but it's the kid who takes action that's going to get there. Those who wait for some God to reach down from a cloud from up above and say, I want you, will never get the job. You have to be more than that. You have to sell yourself to some degree. It is the fuel that moves one forward among thousands of others. And ambition is the notion or the inspiration, but drive is what propels a career forward, doing more than wishing. The next is commitment. Now, again, commitment and drive and ambition are all sort of intertwined, but they are separate things. The entertainment industry, especially Hollywood, is primarily populated by individuals who left their homes and their families behind. In many cases, they gambled their future and their lives to succeed in the business. Some make it, some don't. Are you willing to gamble everything? Are you a short-termer? I'll give it 6 months, and by then, if I don't do it, I'll do something else. that may be difficult. So if you're in this for the long haul or for life, you're going to be much better off. The next is sacrifice. You must be willing to sacrifice to succeed. Now, the question is, how much are you willing to sacrifice? If the answer isn't everything or almost everything, perhaps you should reconsider. Marriage, children, leaving your home and or your family. Are you a first one in, last one out person, which is usually what happens? A lot of times if you're working on a series or on a game, you're in there working hard for that one game, and you hope that another one comes along. Freelancers, and you're going to learn a lot about freelancers. That's probably the easiest way to get your foot in the door. But there are risks with being a freelancer. But the number one thing is the lack of stability, because maybe you're working really great for 3 months, and at the end of 3 months, you're back on the freelancer lot looking for more work. If you're willing to sacrifice and willing to work an all-nighter, that's big. Weekenders, holidays. I can tell you that many times you couldn't believe the number of hours you had to work, especially with animation, because animation very often is a race to finish, because those who determine how long it takes to animate are generally not the people that are sitting there doing the animation. So they think, well, we can finish that scene in 4 days. That's a reasonable amount of time. But very often you're solving a problem for the very first time. So you can't always count on something being formulaic and, oh, don't worry, we'll have it ready by then. It isn't easy to tell. So you kind of have to be willing to sacrifice in this career. The next is being a team player. And this is important because team players are always in demand. Now, college is one of the best and only times that you can sort of try out team effort. I know many people really dread being on a team, because a team can often mean 2 people do the work, 2 people do nothing, and 2 people dabble in the middle. And you may recognize that as, yeah, that's kind of the way it is. And I know that to be the case. I have a daughter who went through animation school and really groaned when she had to do those kinds of projects, because she was the type that would jump in and put the work in where others would come up with reasons why they couldn't or whatever. But being a team players are always in demand. They are sought after. They are better than that person who doesn't get along with anyone. Maybe a great animator. I've hired great animators in the past, but they were a pain in the neck to try and pigeonhole into with other people. They were to this or to that, or just didn't get along or didn't try. But diva behavior is best avoided. Even if you're good, it's not a good idea to behave like a diva. And we'll talk a little bit later about the importance of the importance of being okay when someone criticizes your work, because a lot of people think they're criticizing them, not their work. And pros will learn the difference. It is not a reflection on you necessarily. It's just a reflection on that particular piece of animation that they're looking at. Filmmakers seldom do their art in a vacuum. Inevitably, filmmakers must collaborate with a team. Directors, supervisors, equals, and those beneath you in the pecking order all must work together. Now, often you'll encounter artistic temperaments. Employers, producers, and HR people look to talented individuals first who get along with others. They're the ones that get hired first. The next is willingness. Now, that's really interesting. I've hired people that will do anything one asks them to do in a professional caliber. And other people who, well, I've heard people say, well, I've kind of got a party I wanted to do, and, oh, I got a birthday party I need to do. And that's fine. That's good. But sometimes you need those people who are willing to do what's necessary to get something done in order to protect their job. Now, there are 2 distinct personality types in filmmaking workplace. They're what I call the big deal or can-do people, and the no big deal people. Now, here's how, if you say, hey, so-and-so, would you do this thing for us? And they go, oh, no, that's a big deal. You're asking me to do this and this and this, and I'm going to have to do this and this and this. You don't want to work with those people. You don't want to be one of those people. You want to be the person that says, no problem, I'll do it. It'll be ready Tuesday, or whatever you need to do. So don't be a big deal person. Be a no big deal person. That's the type that you want. People who are willing to take care of business and don't make a big deal of the sacrifices they have to make. Some people like to impress by creating the sense that whatever they're asked to do is a really, really big deal or a big problem. They feel the need for self-aggrandizement by listing off what all must be done in order to achieve what you've asked of them. Oh, you've asked too much this time. This can't be done overnight. We're going to have to really think this thing through. I hope you don't know I hope you know what you're asking of us or me. We were up all night working this out for you. Believe me, producers and directors dealing with dozens of strong personalities daily have an enormous burden. They grow weary of the naysayers, or as I like to call them, soul crushers. Then there's the winning, positive, can-do attitude. I'll get right on it. We'll figure it out, no problem. Directors love working with these guys that just come through, and we always seek them for their next projects. I can tell you that the first people I want to hire, whether it be freelancers or get on my team, are the people who take care of business without much noise and complication. When dealing with dozens of individual contributors on a project, which type would you rather work with? The best advice I can give you is say yes, then figure out how. Don't announce how difficult it's going to be and the fact that you don't know how or can't do it. Or put provable effort into the attempt. Stay late, consult, ask around, dig deep, be a winner. Better to be a loser with a winning attitude than a winner with a losing attitude. Next, we have experience in training. While not always essential, experience is a huge plus. It often serves as a qualifier for a position. Now, for those starting out, it's vitally important. List anything and everything you can. Be creative. I'm not saying being dishonest, but be creative when you're listing things, for example, on your resume. Find a way to make something sound maybe a little more important than it might have been. I'm not saying exaggerate, but at least make sure that your work is represented in the most positive light possible. Create work for yourself if necessary. If you're a freelancer or if you don't have work, make a reel. As you'll find out later, you'll be hearing this over and over again. You've got to give them a reason to notice you. So again, as one gains experience through work, your resume can reflect your growth and value to an employer. Next, we have your work ethic. Unless your family owns the studio, you have a better chance of succeeding in this industry with a strong work ethic. Simply put, if you have any serious doubts you can or will make that 7 a.m. call, you are in the wrong business. Glamour professions are infamous for the rule of next. It means for every gainfully employed person, there are 10 anxiously awaiting people who would die for your job. TV stations are a great example. They pay poorly because everybody wants that job. Either you pay your dues or you move on. Next, talent. Do you have extraordinary talent for the art? Are you a good actor or a good artist or a good filmmaker? Talent is not essential, but it'll help your career move forward faster and farther. Exceptional talent is no guarantee of success, but it does improve your chances. To succeed on a Lucas or Spielberg, or for that matter, a Pixar level, extraordinary talent is usually essential. Now here's chutzpah, believe it or not, especially if one is looking at moving to either coast, especially Hollywood. It took a lot of chutzpah for that person to walk in and ask for that job. You want this said about you. You want to come in and you want to be bold. You want to show some audacity, some nerves or courage in the workplace is a good thing. It's not essential, but it is looked up to. Education, obviously, is important. College or trade school education is a plus, but a degree is rarely required except in managerial or executive positions, or for that matter, teaching. But studios and film companies do occasionally look into individuals that can run a set as well as be articulate and convincing in an executive boardroom. With the exception of executive work, bookkeeping or script writing, degrees or no degrees is seldom a really big issue. I've hired based on the quality of reels and portfolios or outstanding internships, in general, can-do attitudes over degrees, even regardless of where you get a degree from. In fact, very often the employer may have a prejudice for or against the school that you attended. Now, leadership. Do you have true leadership skills? Can you command a crew of 3 or 30 or 300 or 3,000? Are you a leader or a follower, a tortoise or a hare? There's room for both. While the leaders rise faster and go farther, the followers can be of equal value to a studio. I used to call them Clydesdales versus thoroughbreds. You know, Clydesdales are those giant horses that they use behind the Budweiser beer wagons. Enormous, solid, but reliable and steady. Versus the thoroughbred, which is very fast, but can be very temperamental, can break legs easily. They're very fragile. So, but very often the thoroughbreds can get you further faster and do things in terms of breaking through or thinking outside the box or doing spectacular work, but you can't rely on them for many things. I've hired both in my career. There are two predominant types of employees. The Clydesdale horse is slower, steadier, reliable, and a strong team player. The thoroughbred has a remarkable talent, but may exhibit a diva-like, unstable temperament or exhibit poor work habits. Disruptive and egotistical behavior is a cancer to a studio or a team. I had best results with hiring 2 Clydesdales for every thoroughbred. That's kind of my secret to success, if you will. A case study, I once hired a thoroughbred with impressive talent. His demo reel consisted of 1 film. It was exceptional, but the credit roll consisted of Title I, directed by Baron L. Dixon. Title II, produced by Baron L. Dixon. Title III, music by Baron L. Dixon, and so on and so forth, or maybe a dozen or 14 or 16 more credit titles. I thought it was a brilliant comedy and promptly cracked up. It turns out it was not. I did hire the fellow, but he caused so much disruption, he only lasted for 1 project. Next is creativity. Creativity, it's debatable whether or not it can be taught. I just don't know. In my opinion, either you have it or you don't. Depending on your particular job, this can be essential or not important at all. If you're a writer, creativity means you can find a more entertaining way to tell the same stories. Or better yet, you may come up with new stories. But if you're a grip or a transportation captain, creativity is not important. True creativity, creative thought is actually quite rare. Real creative. Great creative is fresh thought, a new plot, a new way of doing something, a new way of saying something. Something that they've never seen or heard before. That is the kind of creativity that I specifically value. Next, being an anticipator or one who looks ahead. This is kind of important. In fact, it's very important. Can you see the probability of a light stand being kicked over on a set, or a cable being tripped over, or the need to hire more extras for an upcoming wide shot? The fact we need more staff at animators to make a quota, etc. These are the people who producers and directors look to and want on their sets or in their studios or on their team. Be one of these people. Don't remain clueless or complacent. Let's look at focus and attention span. The ability to remain focused, especially on set, to maintain a sense of urgency is critical. Again, these are the people who producers and directors look up to and want on their sets, those who pay attention, those who are very focused on what's going on. There may be small talk on a set, there may be joking around or whatever, but when it's time to work, these people are the first ones to be quiet, the first ones to focus in. Be one of these people. Be alert always to what happens on the set or in the office or while you're animating. Stay in character, stay focused, be in the moment with your animation, or if you're involved with live action, stay in the moment there too. Acting. Participation in drama and theater arts not only improves one's ability in performing, dialogue, inflection for stage, but also in staging, rigging, and importantly, blocking in business. Whether one directs live action or animation, this proves invaluable. In my opinion, CGI represents the perfect distillation of acting or performing. The voice artist renders a well-crafted vocal performance. Then a gifted animator acts out the scene. Animation performances have the added advantage of not being in real-time process, so honing and perfecting every nuance, every little finger move, every bat of the eyelash, nuance is incredible possible, unlike with live action. You kind of get what you get. You may do multiple takes, but you don't have anywhere near the control that you have with animation. So you should dig deep into the emotions. Why is the character doing that? And study how do other people act and move when they're doing certain pieces. A case in point, what I talk about, I use the term taking the elevator down. What that means is when you're thinking about a scene that you're writing or animating or performing in, think deeply about it. What is that person feeling? That's why I call it take the elevator down to the lowest depth, to the root core. What's really going on? Are you expressing fear, isolation, so on? A case in point, I performed the role of a Captain Ba in an Alamo virtual reality scene. And I found myself recording it at 3 a.m. outside in order to get that sense of what it might have felt like. And I was performing in the dark with a microphone with a very long cord. But it helped me to get into the moment, which was essential because I had to get across fear and isolation. I had to have some tremble in my voice. And what does that fear look like? What does it feel like? How does it manifest itself? It's the difference between feeling versus acting. If you feel it, you're already doing a great job. It's going to come out fine. If you're just up there saying lines the way you think they should be said, that's not quite the same thing. So you'll find that feeling is better than acting in this case. The other thing is to be adaptable and open-minded. Be open-minded to suggestions. Be adaptable. I can't tell you how important this is because I work with people whose ego is on the line. If you say, boy, I wish that hand had come up a little bit higher on that, then they're offended. It's sad to me to be around people that cannot differentiate their work from themselves. Work against the temptation to act stuck in your ways. In every studio I've worked, there was an obvious and often predictable phenomenon among beginners animators. We call it the new animator syndrome, which meant you couldn't tell them anything they don't already know. Or another way to put it is they haven't learned what they don't know yet. Know that regardless of whatever you expect to be doing, your career can and very likely will stray. For example, I started as a filmmaker making safety films. Then I became an advertising executive. Then I became an animator, then an animation director, then a CGI pioneer, then a CGI effects director, then a script writer, then an ad agency creative director, then a live action director, a virtual reality pioneer, then a virtual reality director. Each step was of significant benefit to the next. And the other thing to look for is the long lines versus the short lines, as I put it. When I first started looking at getting into the business, there was a long line of people who wanted to be directors, but there was a very short line of people who were looking to be animation directors. And I thought, well, I've got the skills to do both. I'm going to get in the short line. And that was a good call. Now we're going to talk a little bit about luck. A very dear friend I grew up with and often had in my early movies fancied himself a great actor. He was not, but his family had lots of money and connections, so he ended up going to Juilliard in New York. His roommates were Christopher Superman Reeve, Robin Williams, Kelsey Grammer of Cheers, and Robin Williams. I'm sorry, and Kelsey Grammer of Cheers. His girlfriend was Shelley Duvall, who was a big star at the time in the 80s and produced several popular TV series. Yet he went nowhere because his sense of entitlement destroyed his drive. Everything was handed to him, and the minute it wasn't handed to him, there was nothing. He'd not learned any skills about moving forward in the business. Another case in point is you may know who Bruce Willis is. I remember when Bruce Willis happened to be a kid who was walking up behind a set. In fact, we were shooting on a Hollywood street, and he was out there walking around, and he sort of looked cool. He had kind of a breezy walk. And so we asked him if he'd mind stepping up, and he happened to be wearing Levi's jeans, which the commercial was about. We asked him if he'd come up and do that on camera, which he did. And that happened to catch on. He parlayed that into doing more commercials, then into TV appearances, and eventually his own TV series called Moonlighting, which I worked on, and on to making action movies. And so luck is the one ingredient that can happen. Being in the right place at the right time is a real thing. But you can only have that happen if you're active and circulating. Bruce was out walking around that day. He was intentionally walking near a film set. He knew that we were pointing our cameras in his direction, and he sort of made that accident happen. So it's great to have that in the back of your mind, unless, of course, you have relatives in the film business, or your uncle owns the studio, which doesn't always happen. Nepotism I don't know particularly about that being a major problem in Texas, but it is something that's very real. It is incredibly real in Hollywood. Hundreds of aspiring and experienced editors could not even get an invitation to join the Editors Guild, but a buddy of mine at Paramount had a guild card, not because he earned it through masterful editing. In fact, he didn't even know how to edit, but because he was connected. His uncle got him in. It's not fair at all. But as you'll learn, fairness has nothing to do with the animation industry. So be prepared to have your own stories of nepotism. I'll give you another case in point. You may have remember a TV series called Happy Days or Mork and Mindy. A guy named Gary Marshall created both of these. And he had a great many TV shows and movies and is very successful for getting his family involved in his projects. He made his obnoxious daughter, Penny, a TV star in her own sitcom called Laverne and Shirley. She was unattractive, obnoxious, had a horribly whiny voice, but luckily, the further you are from Hollywood, the less this is likely to affect you. Here's something that's really important. Some people are allergic to it, and it's called networking. I cannot think of a word that, in my opinion, is more repugnant or more exploitive than the word networking. But nonetheless, working the room or working the crowd or glad handing or handshaking, etc., works. It works better than being flopped on your couch, believe me. Becoming involved in the filmmaking community, making connections, joining groups, guilds, associations, etc., it usually and eventually pays off. My Bruce Willis connection led to a stint as an effects director when he got his own TV show. Join societies, go to meetings, meet people in your field, work on crews, volunteer. This is more important than you know. Now we'll talk about apprenticeship and dues paying. The old school Hollywood studio system meant one worked their way up through the ranks. If you wanted to direct, usually first you had to work as a PA, a production assistant, or a gopher, then a director's assistant, a second assistant director, then a first assistant director, then maybe you became a director. Or in the case of, say, John Peters, you simply married the star, Barbara Streisand. Now, back in the day, nobody was called a director until they had earned and learned every step of the way. So by the time you reached director, you were thoroughly knowledgeable and knew your craft extremely well. This paradigm has changed. Nowadays, any film school grad or aspiring filmmaker with an iPhone and editing software can call himself a director and hang a shingle on the internet. The old definition of when you're a director is when a director calls you a director, not what you post on the internet. Standard for excellence. I tend to admire the work of individuals whose coworkers call them perfectionists. I've been called that a few times. But you must learn the appropriate degrees of quality if you're going to be working on projects. For example, if you're creating your own epic, be a perfectionist or be a slacker as much as you want with your own time and your own budget. However, if you're contributing to a client or a company's project, pay close attention to the level of work and the deadline. It's a balance of quality versus output speed. In fact, one case in point was when Joe Dante was directing a picture called Explorers on the Paramount lot, which I was working with. He was making a wonderful movie. We all knew it. We could see it was coming together so well. But we got a memo that said that we had to cut the delivery date short by 6 months because the Paramount Pictures executive pool were not going to get their bonuses unless so many pictures were released by the end of the year. So they put Joe's picture, Explorers, into the fast track, which meant that we had to compromise an enormous amount in order to get the picture delivered in time. Unfortunately, it hurt the film badly. It hurt Joe Dante's career badly, but that often can happen. It's kind of like when you start a project in school, and at first everybody's wanting to throw in everything, but as the semester grinds on, reality sets in. Then the compromise engines are always deployed. Beginners often bite off more than they can chew. That's not unusual, especially with students, but that does happen. One of the last things I wanted to mention is something called fear of failure. Now, this sounds horrible, but it's really not. It's really maybe one of the best things you can have. If you're okay with doing a mediocre job, you may someday have problems. People are usually hired based on their education, experience, on-the-job competence, or their reputation. To simply do the job adequately may not be enough. If you're that person who's never late, reliable, quick thinking, and who thinks ahead, and who gets us all home 15 minutes faster, you will likely succeed. Fear of failure is an asset, in my opinion, to be treasured. To take another look at all these wonderful things that we're talking about: passion, love your work; ambition, drive; commitment, sacrifice, being a team player; willingness, experience and training; work ethic, talent, chutzpah, education; leadership, creativity, being an anticipator; focus or attention span; acting, adaptable, open-minded; luck, nepotism, networking, apprenticeship or dues paying; standard for excellence; and fear of failure. Those are the things that we look for. As for the assignment, what I'm asking is that you submit this to Blackboard 48 hours before our next class. The specifications are here of how it's to be done. I want you to select the 10 attributes which you deem most important to you and your career. And that will be your next assignment. Thanks for watching, and I'll speak to you later.